Welcome to a very special edition of American Warrior Radio, the place to be for news, notes, interviews, and current events for all issues military and veteran related. If you or someone you know has ever worn the uniform of the U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, or National Guard or Reserves, you've come to the right place. American Warrior Radio right here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1060 WMEL, and online worldwide at 1060WMEL.com, sponsored by AVET Project. Folks, this program is all about supporting our troops and their families, both past and present. So please get comfortable, grab a beverage, but don't forget a pen and paper to jot down a note or two, because we're always efforting to bring you important information that you can use and share with others. With that said, let's roll down the runway and get this show off the ground. You all know me, I'm Garen Cohn. I'm an Air Force veteran, a retired legal advocate for veterans, and founder of AVET Project. But all you regular listeners of American Warrior Radio know that I never fly through the airwaves alone.
Good morning. I'm Glenn McGuffey. I'm retired Air Force, and I'm the retired manager of the Brevard County Veteran Services team, where it was my honor to help our veterans and their eligible dependents obtain VA benefits earned by service to our country by the veteran, and I did that for about 22 years. I retired a couple years ago. I've been doing it for 24, and so you can reach me if you need some help with your claim at Glenn, 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 at AVET Project, AVETPROJECT.org. So with that, Garen hit the nail on the head. We've got a special program for you today. So kick it off, Garen.
I gotta tell you, on this very special day, which we recognize in this nation as Armed Forces Day, we are honored and privileged to have the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, Robert, who wants to be addressed as Bob because he's just like us, everybody, Robert McDonald, join us on this special edition. So go ahead, Vince, cue that music. On the line with us live is Secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs, your secretary, everybody, Bob McDonald. Bob, can you hear me?
I sure can, Garen. It's great to be with you today.
Well, thank you, sir, as busy as you are, to take the time to share with us and our audience some of the goings-on with the VA. Gosh, we really are honored and privileged, and I gotta say, we've got a bunch of questions to ask, but it's always great to meet you, and you've appeared on American Warrior Radio video channel before on YouTube and our other social media pages, and we appreciate that every time we get a chance to speak with you, Mr. Secretary, which I will call Bob because you prefer that, right?
I do, and it's always been great to be with you. I enjoyed being with you this weekend at the Invictus Games.
Yeah, that was a real treat, and we got to meet your press secretary, Victoria. Hi, Victoria. The Invictus Games, real quick, give us a high side pass, to borrow one of your terms there, Glenn, as to what that was, and particularly you participated in the panels at the Invisible Wounds of War, the PTSD Symposium.
Yeah, I think the big thing about the Invictus Games is it's an adaptive sports event that really provides the opportunity for veterans, particularly those with catastrophic wounds, both physical and non-visible wounds, to achieve things that they didn't think they could achieve. I saw a gentleman from the UK veteran who was missing both of his legs, bench press 418 pounds.
Wow.
I never expected to see that in my whole life. I saw a gentleman, Will, the captain of our American team,
Yes.
cycle at a faster pace than I could, and he has a prosthetic leg. At VA, we spend about $8 million a year supporting adaptive sports. We have 6 national events, and we're big believers that adaptive sports are part of the recovery for veterans.
Oh, for sure, it is. It's integral to getting them from the battlefield and the wounds that they sustain back, reintegrated back into civilian life, where they can actually be functional, have purpose, and some quality of life beyond what their obvious injuries. And some of them aren't so obvious, though, Bob. Tell us a little bit about that at the symposium, because that was some great information.
We had a great symposium that was sponsored by the George W. Bush Institute. President Bush and the former First Lady Laura were there. Prince Harry was there. The First Lady of the United States showed up later in the evening. And we had a symposium where we talked about what are those invisible injuries and what can we as Americans do to help veterans, to help veterans realize that there should not be or is not a stigma around mental health issues, to help understand what veterans have gone through, particularly now that many veterans are going into the community for care rather than just at VA. What role can VA play, since we train 70% of the doctors in the country through the residencies that we have? What role can we play with Health and Human Services to make sure they're asking the questions of patients? All doctors are asking the questions, did you serve? So that we train all doctors in the military culture to better care for veterans, and we do even a better job in the VA caring for those invisible wounds.
Exactly, and I know the Invictus Games wrapped up, about a week and a half ago, Glenn?
Yeah, and what a wonderful event that was. I believe there were representatives from, about 16 countries, I heard?
Yeah, about 14 and some 500 competitors. And I want to touch on some more of that in a moment. But for the sake of our audience, and really, I want everybody to become familiar with your background. Glenn, you had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, Bob, where were you born and raised?
Glenn, I was born in Gary, Indiana. The house I was born in was across the Calumet River in Indiana Tollway from the U.S. Steel Mill. And obviously, Gary, Indiana was created by U.S. Steel when they created that factory there. And I was honored later in my career to be on the board of U.S. Steel. And that Gary Works plant is still the largest plant in the U.S. Steel global community.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting. And Gary is kind of right on the borderline of Indiana there, isn't it, sir?
It is. In fact, my parents both went to Butler University back when it was a one-building school in Indianapolis. And people from southern Indiana call those of us from northwestern Indiana from the region. That's spelled D-A-R-E-G-I-O-N, the region.
Yeah, and some of the finest corn, some of the great eats around there is just phenomenal. Hey, sir, do you have, was there a family history of service in the military? Because I want you to explain a little bit about your own personal bio there.
Well, certainly my father was in the Army Air Corps during World War II. He was in the Japanese occupation forces. He was at Hitoshi Air Base in Hokkaido, Japan. And it was my great honor years later to fly in there as the CEO of P&G and actually run a business in Japan. My father-in-law was a tail gunner on a B-24. He was shot down over Germany. He was a prisoner of war. He was in Stalag 17.
Oh, wow.
I got him connected to the prisoner of war support group at the Augusta, Georgia VA. It changed his life, and I just wished I had known, 40 years ago what I know today, and I would have gotten connected sooner. My uncle-in-law was a platoon leader in the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, was sprayed with Agent Orange, obviously has medical conditions from that and gets great care from the Asheville, North Carolina VA. And my nephew-in-law commands an Air Force squadron in Goldsboro, North Carolina, and just returned from deployment in the Middle East. I myself went to West Point. I first applied to go to West Point in 6th grade. It's something I always wanted to do.
Wait a minute, Bob. You first applied in 6th grade, so this was your career path from a young man.
I always wanted to lead a differentiated life, and my purpose in life has always been to help others, and I always felt like being an infantry officer in the Army was a way to do that, helping to free the people who, during my childhood, were living behind the Iron Curtain, whether it was in China or in Russia. And, what a thrill it was for me as the CEO of the Procter & Gamble Company to land in an airplane and run a business and be in Tiananmen Square or be in Red Square as a civilian and not have to jump into those places with a parachute.
Well, and while you were at the academy, what was your major?
I was an engineer. I have always enjoyed mathematics, and I wanted to be a professional engineer. So I studied engineering, and I took the what's called the engineering training test before I graduated, and I passed that. So I'm certified to be an engineer in training. But having gone to the military academy, I went into the infantry. I wanted to be an infantry officer. I figure if you're going to be in the Army, be on the tip of the spear. So I went to airborne school as a cadet. I went in the infantry. I was one of the first people in my class to go infantry. I was second, actually. I graduated 13th in my class. I have 870. And
wow.
You pick your branch in order, and I was the second person to pick infantry. So I did airborne school while cadet. Then when I graduated, I went to Ranger School. And then when I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, I went to took my unit to Jungle Warfare School in Panama, Arctic Warfare School up in Fort Wainwright, Alaska, and Desert Warfare School at Fort Irwin, California.
That's a whole lot going on there. And did you at the time, I mean, from a young boy really, you wanted to be in the Army, and you attained the rank of captain. Did you foresee at the time a career in the military, or did you know that you were going to take those skills and everything that you'd learned and apply it to corporate America?
Actually, I always thought that the career would be in the Army. I was on active duty during peacetime, all 9 years of peace, and it's not that I met my wife and I got an MBA at night and on the weekends, and it was a difficult decision, but I made the decision to leave the military. If I had stayed in, I always wanted to be in light infantry units, airborne ranger units, and I knew that wasn't compatible, at least for me at the time, with what I wanted for my family.
Well, talking about West Point and the Army, any pointers or suggestions for high school children that may want to attend the academy or join the United States Army?
Well, West Point to me is, and the military academies in general, are what's great about our country. You can be born in Gary, Indiana. You can come from a relatively lower income family. I mean, there's no barriers in this country if you're willing to go to a military academy. My advice to young people is start early. Freshman year high school grades do count. Don't hesitate to apply early, start a file early. I was very lucky. I had a congressman who, when I applied in 6th grade, said, just keep applying, keep building your file, and we'll take your very best scores by the time you graduate. He to his credit, he did not discourage a young person, and that's one of the things I tried to do. Is I was trying to encourage young people, and my congressman at the time was Don Rumsfeld. And every time I see him, I thank him for encouraging this young child along the way.
What an amazing story. Folks, we are blessed to be chatting with Secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs, Bob McDonald. Give our audience just one unforgettable memory as a cadet, because I know there's some wild things that go on there, but within the law, give us something that is a good memory for you.
Well, I think the thing you learn that very first day, the first day is called R Day, or Reception Day, and as a new cadet, you're showing up, and for me it was my first exposure to a military culture. Later, my junior year, that summer, I ran R Day for the Corps Cadets, and one of the things you learn is the immense attention to detail in the military. So knowing I wanted to go to West Point, wanting to always be early, be ready, I showed up very early in the morning. I wanted to be one of the very first ones there, get my uniforms, get organized. And of course, I went through the whole day, and I was ahead of schedule given that I went early. So I folded all my clothes and put them away. We then marched out to Trophy Point to be sworn in. And after I was sworn in, I marched back with my unit. My squad leader had taken all my clothes and all my great organization and dumped it in the middle of the room. And I wondered, what are you doing dumping my stuff in the middle of the room? And he said, No, new cadet McDonald, you need to learn. We have a certain way you fold your underwear, and there's a certain place
Yep.
to put it. And that was my first introduction to military attention to detail.
Welcome to the Army.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I should have learned it earlier in the day, because as a new cadet, the man in the red sash, the man in charge, says, step up to my line, and of course all of us without that attention to detail would either step on the line, behind the line, or in front of the line, and we were never on the line. And we learned very quickly the 8th time he shouted, step up to my line, that he was being precise about it.
Yeah, precision for sure. Okay, so of your many accomplishments, and you listed a few, the Ranger tab and all of the different qualifications that you have, what are you most proud of?
Gosh, I'm most proud of my soldiers. I think about a mortar unit, 4.2-inch mortar unit, combat support company, 1st of 504th Airborne Infantry. Colonel Dave Harris came up to me on the drop zone. He said, put your parachute in the back of the Jeep. We're going to the firing range. I did that, and we drove up to the firing range, and Colonel Harris relieved the platoon leader who was there. They were going through an RTEP, a readiness test, and had scored very poorly. Fired the platoon leader, who was a first lieutenant. I was a butter bar, second lieutenant. He said, McDowell, you take over this platoon, and a year later I want them, competitive. And a year later we got the second best score in the division. I'm sorry it wasn't the first best. I think we had about 96%. Wow. But it wasn't me. It was the soldiers. They were all the same soldiers. And it was a matter of getting them out shooting and training, and those guys are the greatest guys in the world. I just heard from one of them the other day. I mean,
no kidding.
I got an email from Paul Beekner, who was my very first radio telephone operator in Charlie Company, 1st of 504th, and he wanted to go to West Point. I helped him go to West Point. Has had a sterling career as an airborne Ranger infantry officer in the Ranger Battalion, Special Forces, and he just wrote me that his daughter is joining West Point this year and will be in the class of 2020. Really makes me feel old.
Makes you feel old.
But that's where the memories come from. It's from the soldiers. It's from the brotherhood and the sisterhood you have with the people you served with. And that's why I love this job. I mean, it's my chance to try to give back to them.
Oh yeah, for sure. But you didn't just step from being a U.S. Army captain into Secretary of the VA. There's a whole career in there, and we want to touch on that. But Glenn, Bob was mentioning the travails of being a butter bar, a second lieutenant. You remember those days?
Oh, I remember those days. In fact, I was at a radar site 1 mile from the Canadian border in Montana, where it never got hot. And anyway, I think I had about 22 additional duties, and some of those went through the weekend. So it was like being in Southeast Asia. When I went there, you worked 7 to 7 days a week, except you really worked more than that. But it was all those additional duties turned out to be a blessing throughout my career. So.
Right, and you've already identified yourself, Bob, as a hard charger, somebody that sets a goal and pushes through and perseveres, and that's so important. Can we talk a little bit about, after you separated service, what brought you into the fold, into corporate America, and why did you choose Procter & Gamble? And give us a little bit of the history there.
Sure. Well, as I said, realizing my purpose in life was really to try to help improve the lives of others. I was looking for a company that had a purpose like that and that had values that were similar to military values. I didn't want to join a company where I would feel that in any way I would have to compromise my integrity or my focus on values. And Procter & Gamble for me at the time was that kind of a company. I had completed an MBA while I was in the military at night and on the weekends.
Impressive.
I met my wife. And so I joined Procter & Gamble in 1980 in Cincinnati, Ohio, and continued to move through the ranks. I was in marketing. 1989, we moved to Toronto, Canada. In 1991, we moved to Manila in the Philippines. 1995, we moved to Kobe, Japan. 2001, we moved to Brussels, Belgium. and in 2004 we moved back to Cincinnati, Ohio, which is the corporate headquarters. And eventually in 2009 I became the CEO of the company. And I think what that experience taught me was the just incredible intense focus you have to have on consumer satisfaction. And you know, on any given day, the Procter & Gamble company has 5 billion people on the planet use at least one of its products. And during the time I was CEO, we went from 4 billion people to 5 billion people on the planet. And that was one of the things I was most proud of, because that meant we were improving more lives.
Yeah, that you didn't say million, you said billion with a B.
Billion, yeah. I guess there are about 7 billion people on the planet.
Yeah, and you're touching the lives of all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, only 5 right now, but we're working on the other 2.
Well, during your long and distinguished career with Procter & Gamble, how do you feel that helped you shape your, we'll call it, worldview, and what influences it had on being able to relate to the United States military and veteran community, in addition to your military time in the Army?
Yeah, as I look back, and you know, when I got the call from the White House, I really felt like, you know, God was being revealed to me. There was a plan for my life, and maybe all of that time at West Point in the ASEC and Airborne Division, 33 years with Procter & Gamble, was preparation to do yet the most important job in my life, which is to help VA better care for veterans. There's no better company in the world that thinks about how to provide satisfaction to people who buy products than Procter & Gamble. We spend a lot of time learning a technology called human-centered design, designing products that delight consumers, whether it's Gillette razors, Pantene shampoo, Bounty paper towels, Tide laundry detergent. And we're trying to apply that technology and those skills here at the VA. We're trying to work very, very hard so that every interaction we have with veterans delights them beyond their expectation.
And that's saying a lot, because honestly it is. It's like you've had a normal progression, but I'm so interested. We're running up against the break here, but when we come back, again, we're visiting with Secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs, Bob McDonald. I am keenly interested in finding out how getting that phone call changed your life. But everybody listen, don't go anywhere. American Warrior Radio is going to be right back here on the Talk to Me station, AM 1060 WMEL, and we are talking with none other than your Secretary, Department of Veterans Affairs, Bob McDonald. We'll be right back on AM 1060 WMEL and American Warrior Radio.